Hello, everybody. Welcome. This is the first Cyber Policy Center seminar of the winter quarter. Happy 2023. And we have these every week at noon on Tuesday. And it's great to see such a large turnout for this first seminar. I was concerned we might not be able to get as many people, but we have standing room only for those of you on Zoom, and we usually get 100 to 200 people on Zoom who join us as well. So the goal of these seminars is to bring in speakers from literally around the world to talk about issues in cyber policy. And we have a great lineup for the term that we'll share right at the end. But we're thrilled today to have Professor Florence G'sell from the University of Lorraine, and who's also the chair in digital governance and sovereignty chair at Sciences Po. We here at the Cyber Policy Center are doing a lot with Sciences Po, so much so that we're going to cut this seminar just about 5-10 minutes early so that Florence and I can get on a flight to Paris, where we will be, this will be like, I don't know, what's that reality show? The Amazing Race Cyber Center style here, right? Where we'll go from here to Paris, and then she's doing us a favor by coming here and giving her talk here today, and then I'll be going out there on Thursday and Friday to join her conference over there. So this is, we hope, the beginning of a long and fruitful partnership between Stanford and Sciences Po. There's always good reason for us to go over to Paris for something, right? And so today, one of the things that we are working on jointly as institutions is on what we'll call blockchain policy, the future of Web3. We will be starting a new program here in the Cyber Policy Center, our 7th program on the governance of the future web, which will look at things like blockchain regulation, VR and XR, what I call automated creativity, things like ChatGPT. If anyone in the room or beyond the room who's interested in these issues, feel free to contact me and for greater details. There'll be conferences throughout the term. So today, Professor G'sell will be talking about the impact of blockchains for human rights, democracy, and the rule of law. As is typical in our cyber lunches, she'll talk for 20 minutes to half an hour, and then we'll open up for questions in the room as well as on Zoom. If you're on Zoom, please put in the Q&A, any question you have, and I will filter them out and ask them. So thank you, Florence, for joining us.
Thank you so much. So is the mic working? Can you hear me? Okay. So thank you so much for having me today. Actually, I'm quite impressed and intimidated to see that I have such an audience. So you can see that the title of this report that we wrote with my colleague, Florian Martin Barito for the Council, and the title of this report is quite ambitious. You can see that it's the impact of blockchains for human rights, democracy, and the rule of law. What a title. And the first thing I need to highlight is the fact that, sorry, as opposed to what you could think, it's a preliminary report. And I have to say first that it's been a project that was quite troubled because a few weeks after we started the project, the Ukraine war started, and the Council of Europe was pretty busy dealing with the issues raised by the war, especially since, as you might know, Russia is not part of the Council of Europe anymore. And for us, it was a little bit problematic since the leader of the project was Russian. He was a representative. So in a few weeks, we didn't have anyone to, any counterpart. So this is the reason why this preliminary report is now the final report for now, and that you only have, for now, around 20-30 pages, trying to assess what the impact of blockchains can be for humans. Of course, in the light of the rights protected by the European Convention of Human Rights. Of course, and you might know this cover of The Economist. I think I will not go back and the way the blockchain technology works. I'm obviously a jurist, but I suppose that you know what blockchains are. Those distributed, decentralized ledgers operate autonomously. There is no central authority, and all this was designed, as you probably know, by Satoshi Nakamoto. Well, first designed by Satoshi Nakamoto when he created the Bitcoin blockchain in 2008. So, of course, this is important because there is no trusted third party on blockchains, no authority, and it's a way to get rid of established institutions, states, banks. So it's a way to free people. And this is what I would like to highlight at first, because the blockchain technology has been related to a political claim for, you might have heard or you might have read this manifesto that was written in 1992. Are you familiar with it? The Crypto Anarchist Manifesto. So you can see that it's an old manifesto that was written by Timothy C. May, and that basically said, okay, thanks to cryptographic techniques, thanks to peer-to-peer networks, thanks to decentralizations, we will be able to communicate, to interact online on a peer-to-peer basis with no necessity for a trusted third party, for an authority. And those people that had that claim a few decades ago were called the crypto anarchists because they wanted to bypass states, they wanted to bypass corporations, they wanted to bypass banks. This is what Nakamoto wanted to do when he created the blockchain technology. What I find interesting today is to see that in the very recent years, this claim has a little bit shifted, at least in Europe, and you might tell me if it's the case in the US as well, but the people that you could see 10, 15 years ago opposing states' power, for example, are today people that want to oppose big tech power. And decentralization, the blockchain technology is now seen as an alternative to the web that we have today, which is basically dominated by those very big private companies, centralized companies, where we can see that one man can make decisions, as Elon Musk, you all have followed this. And of course, those decentralized systems could be an alternative. And it's a very important thing for us even when we look at this in the light of human rights, in the light of the European Convention of Human Rights, because it's, of course, a way to make people more autonomous, to re-empower them. So this is why I want to highlight this political claim. And this is also why I would like to highlight how important the question of governance is on blockchain systems. So this image comes from a Medium post that was posted, I think, 4 years ago. And the author of this image removed it from Medium, not on Medium anymore. I kept it because I fascinating, because it's an attempt to show how blockchains work, but in the light of the US Constitution. And if you know the blockchain technology, you know what nodes, miners, developers do on blockchains, you might be amazed about how this is presented here. Because nodes are seen as the executive branch, miners are seen as the judiciary, developers would be the Senate. Of course, you could criticize this, and I think it should be criticized, of course. But it is very interesting to see that the author of this image wanted to show that a blockchain system can be seen as a democracy. And of course, we have, again, a lot of things to discuss and to think before we can really establish blockchain technology could be a solution for us if, again, we want to free people, if we want to guarantee that human rights are respected. So, of course, when you look at the opportunities and the risks of the blockchain technology for human rights and democracy, you have to make a list. This is what we did, and I will come back to this list later. Maybe I could show you first what we did actually in our report. Looked at the fundamental rights that are mentioned in the European Convention of Human Rights. So, for example, you have liberty and security, you have a right to a fair trial, you have the right to respect for family and private life, and we looked at the opportunities and the risk, and we did that for the major fundamental rights guaranteed by the convention, and it was considered as a very beginning of a deeper reflection on those questions. So let me go back to the opportunities. I selected a few opportunities that we can discuss today. So basically the list that we chose to present in the report. So you have various aspects here, and I will only discuss a few of them today. But of course, this list is related to existing use cases. Some use cases that have been developed in certain countries, like, for example, the question of land titles, the question of voting is related to use cases developed in Asia, in Africa, in various regions of the world. What I would like to insist on today is probably one of the most important aspects at the moment, at least is what I think, which is the fact that you have the possibility on blockchains to be anonymous, and you know how it works. You know that you have a public address and a private key, and that it's impossible to know who is behind public address, even though it is possible sometimes to re-identify people by tracking them on the blockchain, but I will come back to this later. So you don't know who exactly public address, which is a guarantee of freedom, because if you're anonymous, you're free to express yourself, you're free to do what you want, you're free to live your life. Yes. Okay. And we put this up here. So okay. So, of course, there are risks, and you know that the blockchain Bitcoin has been criticized for this: money laundering, fraud, terrorism, and of course, this is an issue. But you have limits to pseudo anonymity, and this is why I use this term, pseudo anonymity, because you cannot be fully anonymous on blockchains. Actually, on the existing main blockchain systems like Bitcoin. Why? Because, as I said, you can re-identify users. Usually, when you are a regular user on the blockchain system, you have a digital wallet, and to open your digital wallet, you need to disclose your identity. So if there is, and in Europe, you must know that in Europe we have very, very strong rules in this respect. So you're probably familiar with those know your customer processes. So of course, today I would say you are only pseudo anonymous on blockchains, because at some point it's possible to find you, even though you have blockchain systems that are very opaque. Of course, it is always possible to change the technology in order to make people, again, free to do what they want. So, and you know that there is this game between developers and law enforcement in this respect, and it is the case in Europe, and it's certainly the case here in the US. So this is what's currently happening. You have new privacy kinds. This technology that is known as zero knowledge proof. But the idea behind all this is to have blockchain environments that are clearly capable of ensuring privacy, of ensuring freedom. And so this is the current issue. We need to find the right balance between the need to fight against terrorism, against money laundering, and the need to ensure that people can evolve online, can express their ideas online without being bothered. And today, for example, in Europe, we have a proposal of regulation from the EU Commission that provides that encrypted communications shouldn't be tolerated anymore. That, for example, those companies that provide encrypted communication services should surveil communications online, especially to prevent child abuse and child trafficking. And of course, there is an enormous pushback against this project. Why? Because encryption is considered as a fundamental guarantee. So this is one of the questions that I would like to raise. Could we say that encryption is a right or a fundamental right? Because of course it ensures freedom of expression, freedom of individuals to live their private lives, etc. So this is something that I'm currently trying to write on, and I don't have any final answer to that question. But we probably need at some point to have a position about encryption. Another aspect and another opportunity of the blockchain technology is the fact that it could provide alternative solutions for identities, for identification. Usually it's the state that identifies people, that says that you are who you pretend to be. And you know that in the online world, today, we mostly rely on the services provided by those big tech platforms, Facebook, Amazon, etc. They have the skill to identify people online. And this is seen as problematic. In my country, in France, the French government is creating something that we call, I couldn't translate exactly, but it would be a government-based digital identity. Because we don't want those big tech platforms to decide for us how we can identify ourselves. And it's the same at the EU Commission level. So this is, of course, problematic to see that users are dependent on big tech to identify online. And here, the blockchain technology could provide a solution that is called the self-sovereign identity, giving users the ability to control their own virtual identity. You could have a digital wallet that could help you create digital identifiers, and related, linked to your identifiers, you would have various credentials. For example, you would be, of course, you wouldn't disclose your name or your date of birth. You would have your identification, your online identifier. But you could produce a credential saying, for example, that you're old enough to buy alcohol or to work. Or so it's difficult for me because I don't have much time to explain specifically how the technology works. But it is a way to help people identify themselves on decentralized system without relying on a third party, which is, again, a way to free people. And it's an alternative solution to the solutions provided by the big tech platforms. So these are many advantages. And again, we can get rid of single centralized authorities. One last point that I want to highlight regarding opportunities is the fact that you can protect your data on blockchains by controlling how your data can be shared. So how does it work? Well, you might have a cloud somewhere where your data is stored, but on the blockchain, you can allow people to access your data on a case-by-case basis. And again, you will use a private key to authorize or deny people to data. This is basically what is being developed in Europe for health-related data. In Estonia, you have various projects in Estonia, but not only in Estonia. And this is something that enables, in the wording of European jurists, informational self-determination, because this is the expression that we often use to say that we want to protect personal data. So maybe just one word about dispute resolution systems. Of course, we can have decentralized justice services on blockchain's platform with various types of procedures. I don't know if some of you have already the occasion to encounter those types of online dispute resolution solutions on blockchain's platform. Here you have the Aragon Court, where you can select users to act as judges. No, the judges are named guardians, and those guardians are supposed to rule not in light of the existing law. No, they are asked to rule the way the majority is expected to rule. And if they rule with the majority, they are rewarded. If they don't, they lose their tokens. They lose their deposit. So this is an opportunity to solve conflicts on blockchains, but it's also a risk because, of course, we want the right to fair trial to be respected. So, and very quickly, when we look at the risk, of course, you have a risk in terms of privacy. Of course, we Europeans are very much concerned about data protection and compliance with the GDPR. And on the blockchain, you have transparency, you have immutability, a difficulty to identify who controls data. So, of course, this raises major issues when we want to apply the GDPR framework. So, of course, it's a problem. But we have new solutions to solve the problem. When we want to rectify the information, we can add a new transaction on the blockchain. Someone said, yes, there is a right of erasure under GDPR. Well, just destroy the encryption key. And then it's as if, the data was erased. We could discuss that, but still, we have new techniques to comply with our existing frameworks. One major problem, and I think I will stop now because I would like to keep time for questions, but is the question of the applicable law. This is a major issue that we have on blockchain systems. You know that it's very difficult to locate even the nodes on blockchain systems. We will face this issue with extended reality environments as well. It's difficult to know where people are, and it's difficult to determine which law should be applied to a given contract, to a given conflict. And what I'm a little bit worried about is the fact that we would find on those systems new way to solve disputes that would be totally independent from our rules and totally independent from our fundamental rights, and especially the right to a fair trial. What I've just said about the Aragon platform is interesting, but also a little bit concerning. because we want the rule of law to be respected. So I think that this is a major issue. We are not finished with it. We don't have any final solution in this respect. And again, this question will be raised again and again in the following years. So I think I will stop here for now, and any questions are welcome.
So why don't you sit here and I'll
sit
here?
Okay.
Is that good, Ben? Okay. So that was great. That was good. There's so little written, I think, particularly on the non-crypto applications of blockchain and thinking about the governance questions. I mean, we're trying to do more and more here at Stanford. Some of you know there's a Center for Blockchain Technology Dan Bonnet runs. And so I think this is, it's the questions you're asking here are so important. Let me start with what I kind of think is the meta question, excuse the use of that word these days, and that is, how do you bring centralized governance to a decentralized system, right? And it's kind of the fundamental question on any of the, we can talk about a kind of market for governance where different blockchains have, rules of governance. But as we think about like European rules for blockchain technology, whether inside the crypto realm or outside, a lot of these sort of prescribed rules, whether it's related to privacy, they assume the ability of the government to go in and attack, some entity, whether it's an account or someone running it. Whereas, blockchain in some respects is trying to get away from that ability. Now, of course, the bigger it is, I mean, if you're talking about Bitcoin, if you're talking about something, then we know that law enforcement's had a better role at that. But speaking as someone in France, if you've got the French government trying to enforce some of these rules related, let's say, to privacy and security on a given blockchain, what is the kind of pathway through which that's going to happen? If you had to sort of think about, enforcing whether it's privacy protection, let's say on the blockchain or something like that, what would that look like?
So it's a tough question because I think it depends on the type of blockchain you look at. If you look at the Bitcoin blockchain, it's almost impossible. What you can do is to look at the points of entry. Right. This is a traditional solution that we developed over the past 20, 30 years regarding the internet. So you will look at the protagonists on the blockchain, try to find where they are. And then as soon as you know that a given company is operating from Paris, of course, you can ask this company to comply. But it is, as I said, very difficult to locate the protagonist. The blockchain system, it's now easier and easier. But of course, you have blockchain systems that are so opaque that it becomes absolutely impossible to locate the protagonists, the companies, the users. And moreover, you have this very strong claim from the blockchain community that is basically, we don't want the law. We don't want to be regulated. We want to have our own rules that obey a different logic. So this is basically what is currently preoccupying regulators, especially in Europe and especially in France, since and this is probably a difference with the US, we are very much inclined to regulate as soon as there is a technological evolution. So the first thing that we ask, when will we have the next regulation? So yes, it's problematic. And I don't know if this remark is related, but I would like to make it because it's again, an important difference between Europe and the US, I think, is that when you look at the existing flows of what we call the web 2, web second, the existing web, in Europe, we would say, okay, you have flows, you have problems. We are going to solve all this with new regulations. And this is currently what we are doing. And of course, this raises issues of implementation, enforcement, etc. Here, my impression is that maybe because regulating is not as easy as it is in Europe, or maybe because there is a different approach, you might say, okay, you have flows, and we might solve the issue by changing the technology, changing the protocol. So, of course, it's not an answer to your question, but...
Well, but even that last point you make, changing
Yes.
the protocol,
Yeah.
right? It's like that's a heavy lift, right? And so, you know, the protocol also is kind of an interesting question here, but what the, is the answer then, unless you are able to play by the European rules or French rules on this, that then the benefits of the blockchains are, I mean, we're speaking very generally here, but of particular environments would not be available to French citizens. That's basically what you're saying, right?
Yes. What I could say also is that since we have a certain tendency to see regulation as something needed, we also consider adopting new regulations and adapting regulations to promote the technology.
Right.
But of course, you have certain aspects of the technologies that we want. There was a debate 6 months ago about the proof of work protocol. Mm-hmm. Because why? There was a vote in the European Parliament to prohibit the proof of work protocol due to environmental concerns. So yes, sometimes you might have regulators that basically want to get rid mm-hmm. of the technology or some aspects of the technology.
One of the I mean, I should have been more specific. One of the challenges here, you know, it's easy when you can point to Facebook, right? And if, especially if they have employees there, becomes more difficult as you get to say text messaging and things like that. And the question is, well, you know, is blockchain a technology which is relatively immune to regulation? I mean, look, even the crypto community certainly believes that, you know, well, many people in the crypto community, one of which is under house arrest here in, you know, near the Stanford campus, that you know, who had advocated for, you know, regulation. And so there's certainly a vision, even of those who have completely drunk the Kool-Aid, right, to have some kind of legal regime here. I just wonder on the enforcement side, whether this is going to be a difference in kind or a difference in degree from what we've seen on the Web 2.0 or, you know, the cross-territorial problems that we see with enforcement.
I could answer that by an example regarding the law of evidence. We have a very strict law of evidence in my country, and it's the case in Europe. We have very strict rules that provide what the judge can do, what the court can decide regarding evidence. The judge is not free to assess evidence. So when you provide blockchain and evidence that come from a blockchain system, the judge can do whatever he wants, provided that the judge follows the existing rules. And today, in the French legal system, and it's also the case more broadly in the European legal system, you have no rule that provides that evidence coming from electronic evidence coming from blockchain systems can be accepted. Mm-hmm. So, of course, you have people that say, okay, we should probably change the rules. And we will probably change the rules to accept, so that the court can accept evidence coming from blockchain systems. However, from the blockchain community, you could hear that we don't care because we don't want to go before a French court. Mm-hmm. We'll have our own solutions to deal with conflicts.
So let me talk about that second part. And I think as we move toward a kind of Web3 governance program here, there are two big sides to it. One is government regulation, and the other is internal governance. So now let's talk about that part. And I was attracted, or at least fascinated, by the American constitutional analogy, and I understand why that Medium writer would have taken that down, because it was like, to say it was a square peg in a round hole doesn't quite even, you know, quite, but we're all experimenting with these things. And so do you, I mean, tell me why I'm wrong about this. which is, like I said before, there's a kind of market for governance, right? That you're not going to have all blockchains. There's like one form of governance for each one of these environments, right? It's going to be, all right, some might be monarchical, right? Some might be more populist, more democratic. Some majority rule may have some role to play. Of course, it depends on what kind of conflict, what they're deciding, is an important question. But is that right? I mean, or do you think that there will be sort of like what we have in corporate law, boundaries that are placed on internal governance through regulation or something like that, that there's going to be a menu of options, and then you've got to choose from them, as opposed to a kind of very broad market for different types of governance mechanisms?
What I would say is that I would favor the second option, so that we have a regulation that provides for the best solutions. This is probably a question that we are currently facing regarding the decentralized autonomous organizations, because there is a very strong debate in Europe about the question whether those organizations should be granted legal personhood.
Right.
And of course, there should be conditions. I'm not opposed to legal personhood granted to DAOs, but you know that there is, in principle, there is no one behind a decentralized autonomous organization, no natural person, no name. And it's very difficult to accept the idea that you could have a legal entity with no one behind that is responsible at some point. So we are currently having this debate regarding DAOs, because we are wondering if those DAOs should be granted legal personhood, and at which conditions. So should they be organized in a certain way? Should we have specific requirements to grant them legal personhood regarding governance, for example?
And I want to open it up, so people, if you have questions, please raise your hand. And if there are questions I want one last question, then I'll turn it over, which is, can corporate law take care of this, or not? And so, yeah, I mean, look, it wouldn't be so hard to say that, look, if you want legal personhood, if that's the linchpin here, then you've got to have at least one person who would be, as we say, a throat to choke. And so, and this is not an unfamiliar terrain for corporate law generally. Is it that different?
If you have one natural person behind the DAO, it is acceptable. I think in my country, our legal system would probably accept it. But you need to have at least one name. And so currently, what is in the debate is the fact that you have many people from the blockchain community that would like to be able to create DAOs without appearing whatsoever. And so this is an issue, because you have liability issues. You're probably familiar with what happened with the DAO a few years ago, and there was the case wasn't brought before any court, but it's still a question of liability here.
Yeah.
And use the microphone, and then we'll go over here.
I'm not sure if this is on. Okay. Thanks for your talk. Very interesting. You mentioned privacy and anonymity and freedom kind of in the same breath a couple times. And I can clearly see why privacy and freedom have a really clear relationship, and why anonymity would be good in certain contexts, especially where there's a lack of rule of law and protections for people. But why in a system where we do have rule of law would we want, like, in that system, how is anonymity related to freedom? And why would we want that later? Or your perspective on that, I guess.
It's a tough question. I think anonymity allows you to live your private life as you want, and especially to express yourself. There is one organization here in the US that basically says that anonymity is a right that is related to the right of freedom of expression, or freedom of speech, as you would say here. Because when you are anonymous, you feel more comfortable talking to people and saying what you think. So yes, but I know that it can be very problematic. And again, if I want to speak about the debates that are currently going on in France, for example, the French president, Emmanuel Macron, has said several times that we should get rid of anonymity on social media because you know the reasons, which is to me very problematic due to the need to protect freedom.
Yeah.
Thank you. Based on the presentation, I saw mostly is a project that running on public serving for
running on what?
Public serving for normal people in the country. So like my question would be like, when we are talking about blockchain, there is two types, like public blockchain and private blockchain. So in this case, are you referring to public blockchain such as in Bitcoin or Ethereum, or like private blockchain? Because even in public blockchain, they have decentralized issue that, for example, in Bitcoin, many Chinese mining control that network. And in Ethereum, many pre-mine that control Ethereum network. So in this case, if you want to deploy public service into those blockchain, mostly it's going to control by those people for sure. But if you want to implement with private blockchain, what is different between private blockchain and centralized database that you are using right now?
It's a great question. Let me repeat it for the Zoom audience. So is the concerns that Florence has raised, are they specific to public blockchains, or how should we think about governance of private blockchains, as well as private blockchains that might eventually become public, I guess, is also sort of what you're suggesting, or as they expand. So yeah, it's a good question.
That's a very good question. So to answer the first aspect of your question, I would say that when we wrote the report, we were mostly interested in showing the aspects related to public blockchains, because we were dealing with basically what decentralization has to offer. And my second remark is, of course, that it's difficult to assess the advantages of a private blockchain that is permissioned, that is managed by a few private parties. So it is difficult to assess the advantages of such a blockchain compared to a standard database, as you've said. So to come back to the various aspects and the various questions raised by public blockchains, I think the main question is a question of governance. So you said yes, on the Bitcoin blockchain, at some point, most of the miners were based in China, and they had an overwhelming power on the blockchain Bitcoin. It's not the case anymore. And today, you have other types of blockchain systems where the protocol is different. So you have the proof of stake that is today favored in the blockchain community. So all this, I think, is related to major questions related to the governance of those blockchain systems and basically the protocol. And this is a discussion that we jurists need to have with computer scientists and blockchain experts, because of course, as jurists, we cannot solve that question ourselves. But of course, we need to have blockchain systems that guarantee systems of governance that are efficient, rational, justified, and that, of course, protect fundamental rights.
Let me ask a question that we got from the web, which is, we've seen large enterprises, crypto intermediaries like Coinbase now asking for regulation of their industry, sort of what I was saying before. Is the narrative of Web3 now moving away from replacement to reforming current institutions and flows? Is this what the future of Web3 eventually looks like? A balance of innovation, reform, and regulation of today's digital landscape while introducing new levers of ownership and participation? I think the answer is yes. You know, that I think that in part this is your point, right? Which is that that you know the blockchain community was, as was true of say early internet folks, both you know utopian and anarchist at the same time, right? And we, you know, if that bubble didn't pop a year ago, it certainly popped in the last 2 months, right? And so are we now at a stage where, all right, the question is not about maybe unique laws for them, or that it's going to be, you know, decided in their own utopian universes, but how do we incorporate this new technology into existing legal regimes?
Yes, so this is an example that I could give, which is probably it's in the news, but some of us have moved from Twitter to Mastodon in the recent weeks, which is not a fully decentralized platform, but is more decentralized than Twitter or any other social media. And of course, this raises new regulatory questions, new regulatory issues, especially when it comes to content moderation. And so we will have to deal with this because, of course, currently the regulations that I know as the European scholars are designed for big centralized companies that we can talk to and ask for answers. So yes, we will have new issues, but I think that what we are going to face, and it's only my impression, is a new environment where we have a few fully decentralized systems like the blockchain Bitcoin, but we will have environments that will not be centralized, not fully decentralized, they will be in between, and we will have to deal with them and to see how we can regulate them while letting users decide what they want. Mm-hmm. And of course, it's a new way, and so we're not prepared for this. As far as I know, in Europe, we are still working on those regulations that are meant to regulate the big tech companies. So we are not prepared to adapt to this new environment, and we will do it at some point. Maybe we should anticipate. No, it's still before us.
I wonder, and this is sort of building on another question that just came through the Q&A, which is, I wonder whether this is a kind of proxy battle for, as you kind of suggested, for the encryption security debate, you know, and anonymity and privacy, which is like, you know, the promises that are made from blockchain technology are running up against the same kinds of political obstacles that we were seeing in, you know, that the big firms or the big platforms are seeing in Europe anyway, as to, all right, well, how much power are we going to give the government to peek under the hood as to what is going on in these, you know, semi-private or private conversations. And so sometimes in blockchains, it'd be conversations, sometimes it would be child exploitation material, sometimes it would be something else. But this is the arena in which that fight is taking place on encryption and how much power we're going to give for people to sort of pierce anonymity.
Yes. What I would like to highlight is the fact, because I just said that all new recent regulations in Europe are designed for big tech companies, but they are also designed to involve users, to involve NGOs, to involve various stakeholders in the process. So this is what is currently going on with the DSA. And so this is maybe the type of approach that we could have with those new environments. And so maybe it could be another way to regulate and to control what is going on these.
Yes, last question.
Based on the blockchain, what is your opinion regarding blockchain voting and peer democracy?
Blockchain voting. And what's your view on that? That's something, by the way, we hope to, since that's of my interest in this stuff, that we hope to do here in the Cyber Centers, think about this. But I should say, sorry to steal this from you, but that I'm going to give it back. But that the election, since I'm a voting rights election person, every time I do something dealing with voting machines, as this typical sentence you hear at Stanford, oh, blockchain's going to solve that. not so sure. But anyway, the question is on blockchain voting. What are your thoughts on it?
and
And
pure,
that'll be it. Yeah.
pure democracy as well. Like whether blockchain voting will enable pure democracy.
Yeah.
Well, in principle, I would be strongly in favor of what you call peer democracy or so blockchain votes. I had that discussion with a colleague of mine who is not totally convinced that the process would be totally secure, that would still be cybersecurity issues. But as soon as we solve those issues, why not? And I would be, of course, very interested in new forms of organizations, new possibility of voting based on the technology. I think the main issue at the moment is to make users, to make people participate, which is an enormous issue in Europe and I think here as well. And so in principle, it's maybe in practice, it might be difficult.
Great. I should say that on the democracy issue and on voting generally, whether we're talking about for actual offices or even internally, that perception is key, right? So that there may be a fully secure system where you can, see maybe even change your vote over time because you can see the history. But imagine right now if we had Maricopa County's elections determined by, on a blockchain, how many conspiracy theories might, emerge from that. So thank you so much, Florence. This was wonderful.
Thank you for having me.
Next week, we'll be joined by Jim Dempsey, who will be talking about cybersecurity enforcement. If government regulation is going to increase, how will it be enforced? Since I will be in France with Florence, we will toast you with our champagne. But Andy Grotto will, from the program on geopolitics, technology, and governance, will be moderating that panel. So please come back next week. Thanks so much, everyone.